Are you a crappy partner, crappy wife, crappy husband, crappy mate? This podcast is for you. Give yourself the gift of self-awareness. Learn new skills. Take the time to assess your partnership, marriage, relationship, etc. So how are we going to do this? Start by taking the Crappy Mate quiz. The quiz can be found on our website, www.crappymate.com, on Pinterest, Crappy Mate, Instagram and Facebook, Crappy Mate Podcast. We will dedicate episodes to discussing the quiz topics. In further episodes, we will be exploring common problems, the speed bumps that occur in relationships. Also, we will introduce time-tested skills and helpful hints to enhance your relationship, and we invite you, our listeners, to contribute your thoughts, questions, or concerns regarding relationships. Welcome to the Crappy Mate Podcast. I'm Dr. Richard Vance Barnes, MD. I'm a board-certified general psychiatrist with 25 plus years in psychiatry. I have treated patients in a variety of settings, both inpatient units, outpatient units, partial hospitalization units, as well as detoxification programs and rehabilitation programs. And I've had a private practice for many, many years.
And I'm Barbara Quaid, a marriage and family therapist. I also have over 25 years experience working with families, individuals, and couples. And my life as a therapist has been both humbling and joyful. Before we get started, I'd just like to talk about our disclaimer. The Crappy Mate podcast is designed to be a useful tool to help individuals and couples have happier and healthier relationships. This podcast is not a substitute for individual or couples therapy, and as always, relationships need to be safe. Seek professional help as needed.
The Crappy Mate podcast was developed out of hearing years and years of stories and accounts from patients in therapy about their mates and themselves actually being crappy mates and poorly behaving within the relationship. And so this concept was then developed into a podcast of how can we help people to actually improve upon their relationships.
And so in order to do this, we developed a quiz. And the quiz, we really thought about some concepts that we thought were important in a relationship. And so the Crappy Mate quiz ended up being a 10-question self-scoring assessment that can be found on our Facebook page. And our Facebook page is aptly named the Crappy Mate Podcast. And along with the quiz, you will find a glossary with the terms we used both in the podcast and on the quiz. And this is so we can all be on the same page. Now, to score the quiz, you will read each question carefully and then ask yourself, do I do this almost always, sometimes, or almost never? And when we thought about this, the scoring is like this. Almost always is worth 3 points. Sometimes 2 points, and almost never 1 point. So once you have your total points, you add them up. And a score of 10 to 17 clearly indicates that one needs improvement. A score of 17 to 24, one has a degree of awareness, but improvement can still be beneficial. And a score of 24 to 30, one is aware, insightful, and acting in a positive manner as it pertains to the relationship.
Welcome to the Crappy Mate podcast. You know, today, Barbara, I wanted to talk about the topic of love, both immature love as well as a mature love. It seems like the topic of love has been coming up in sessions more and more most recently, and I just wanted to be able to discuss that with our listeners today.
Well, I know that when we talk about love, we usually think of romantic love. Eros is how the Greeks named it. And it's in our literature, it's in our paintings, it's in our music, it's everywhere. And romantic love is really, it's the initial piece of love. It's when we meet the person and we think we've fallen head over heels. And what is that? What happens when we're head over heels?
Well, physiologically, we have all these changes, right? Our GI system, we get the butterflies. We might get some other feelings that we get overly infatuated with that person. So we're going to text them a number of times throughout the day. I know that our blood pressure and pulse rate will also rise when we're just thinking about this infatuation, this new love. So there are a lot of physiologic changes that do occur that kind of point to us that, something's happening emotionally.
Something's happening emotionally, but then we have to really see if it's going to stick. And I know that today most people meet each other either through apps or maybe at work. And it's that initial meeting. And then, as you were saying, texting all day long, trying to find out more about the other person. But this is really in the realm of our physicality, our attraction to the other person. And it takes a while for us to get to know someone before we make a commitment.
Well, I would agree. I would agree with that in terms of it being a kind of an initial, I like to think of it as almost like an initial love run, so to speak. But there's this overwhelming infatuation and this drive to want to be with that person and to want to connect with that person, sometimes physically as well as verbally and by way of texting as well. So I want to ask you, Barbara, how do we get to the more mature love? How does that happen?
Well, I think it takes time and it takes effort. And so some of the tools that we have for doing this is when we meet somebody that we're really interested in, we take the time to get to know them, to know who they are. And one of the tools that I think is at our disposal and most helpful to us is our brain. And so there's the old adage, thinking makes it so. And I think once you get it into your head that you want to be committed to a person, that's where your brain is telling you, okay, what does commitment mean? How am I going to do this?
It's interesting that you would say the commitment and the brain. And, my theory is that most of mental health, we have to believe in, right? We have to believe in that we can do certain things. We have to believe that we're going to be successful. We have to believe that someday we won't be depressed. We have to believe that someday we won't have a panic attack. So the mind is a very important tool and a very powerful one. And I think when we're talking about romantic love, we have to sell ourselves and we have to convince our brains that we do love this person and that we care enough to want to do something with them or for them or give them something or something of that nature. But basically, we have to sell ourselves on the notion that we're in love with this person.
We sell ourselves on that notion, and then we have to nurture the relationship.
And how do we nurture the relationship, Barbara? What do we actually do in those situations?
Well, I'm a gardener. You know that. And so it's amending the soil, making sure the soil is healthy. So you have a good base. Maybe you find out about the person, you have similar interests, that kind of thing. And then what you do is you plant your seeds and you water them. You hope that they have good sun and rain. You're tending to the relationship. And that means being thoughtful and thinking about the other person. It means doing things. Like I said, I think love is a verb. It's an active verb. We have to be doing things.
Yes, we have to be doing things. And I think it's the notion that once we have committed and we're in this relationship, I think we have to continue to test it. And I think we have to continue to test our love that we have for the person. So what does that mean? Well, that means that at times you can be with someone that you could choose to see all their faults, right? You could choose to say, oh, this person has this and that they have do that and they don't do that. Or you could train your mind and you can power up your brain to really focus on just the positive attributes of that person. So and if you're able to do that, then you're going to really feel this loving, warm feeling whenever you think about that person. And that's going to just nurture the love that you do have for them.
So I want to just talk to our audience about this because I think, it sounds very formulaic to just think, well, you just think about it and then you love a person. But it becomes a practice. And the more you do it, the more you love that person. And you train yourself to think in positives more than in the negatives.
Yes, when you think about things in the positive, then it empowers you and gives you the energy to continue to go on and to continue to do the good things, especially within a relationship. And, our listeners may have heard some of the earlier podcasts where we talked about being considerate of your mate or showing appreciation for your mate. And appreciation in particular begets more appreciation. And it allows people to feel good about doing certain actions that will then will power up the relationship. And if we think about it in terms of maturing the love that they have for one another, well, that's the way that they'll be able to do it. They'll be able to do it by being able to appreciate the qualities of their mate, and by doing certain things that will help to ensure that they maintain the good feelings for one another.
I think another one of our tools that we have at our disposal is consistency. So it's not like I wake up one morning and say, I don't feel like being with you. It's this consistency. You go through the good, you go through the bad. You take your time with it. You nurture what's going on in your relationship.
I like that concept too of the consistency, because that's something that I think we need to be successful in really any aspect of life, right? We have to have discipline, which then allows us to continue to act in a certain way that's bringing about positive results. So I think the consistency is also something that you have to have when you're thinking about nurturing and maturing your love. You have to be consistent about how you speak to one another. You have to be consistent about the things that you do for one another. Those are some of the consistency items that I believe will help with the maturity of the love.
I think about my grandparents who were married for over 70 years, and they had some traits that I really want to emulate in my own life. And that was consistency. That was trust in one another. They worked really well as a team, and they loved their family.
That's beautiful. And you could see that love, I'm sure, when you would go and visit with them. You could feel it. It's palpable, I would imagine. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. And I think, because they grew old together, I think it just came to an acceptance that they're together and they love each other and they love their family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they also sold one another. They've sold themselves on love, I'm sure. Whatever qualities that they didn't really agree with or they didn't like in their partners and each other, they probably let go by the wayside. They probably ignored it.
They ironed all that out,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yes. No, I think that's beautiful. And so we have some helpful hints for today as well that I believe will help people to grow their love and to make that love into a more sustained root system, so to speak. I like to think about love as, as a small sapling, a small tree. And when it's beginning, you don't have that involved root system. And so adversity, like the wind, like other things that happen in nature, can knock over that love, can knock over that sapling, knock over that tree. But as we develop more and more as time goes on, we have a more sustained root system and we can face adversity together and not have things end us and knock us over like the wind with the small sapling. So
our helpful hints for today on love is number 1, Watch and tend to your thoughts. We talked about our brain as being one of our best tools. 2, spend time with your mate to talk about and assess your relationship. And number 3, when you're talking with your mate about this, focus on the most helpful, loving, and enduring aspects of your union. And number 4, as a couple, look around you. Look at other couples. Look at your friends, your grandparents, your coworkers' relationships. And number 5, incorporate the loving aspects that you have noted in the relationship of others into your own. And number 6, think and plan for the future. I think planning for the future is just giving you more assurance that you're going to be together for the future. And think about what you want your love to look like in 5 years, 20 years, 40 years. And 7, love begets love. The more love we give, the more love we're able to receive, which in turn makes us more loving.
Thank you for that, Barbara. I'm reminded, just in closing, I wanted to share something that I find really, really pretty special. And it comes out of Corinthians, and it has to do with love. And I remind myself all the time of this, and that is love is patient, love is kind. It's not evil. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. And it just does not dishonor others. And it's not self-seeking. And it's not easily angered. And it keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth.
That's very beautiful. And I think, the wisdom of the ages is, look back towards wisdom of others. And I think Corinthians really does that for us.
Yes. Thank you for that, Barbara. And we will close our episode today. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write. In closing the podcast today, I just want to remind our listeners of our disclaimer. The Crappy Mate podcast is designed to be a useful tool to help individuals and couples have happier and healthier relationships. This podcast is not a substitute for individual or couples therapy. And as always, relationships need to be safe. Seek professional help as needed.
Thank you for listening to the Crappy Mate podcast. We invite you to submit comments, questions, and/or concerns about today's podcast, or give us feedback on relationship topics you'd like to hear covered. We encourage you to try our helpful hints. Give these a go, try them on for size. Remember, you can follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages under the Crappy Mate podcast. Our website is www.crappymate.com. And please be sure to subscribe. Thank you for listening.